movie. I'd better let Cuba answer that.
No, I think, you know, the word is spreading. It's just like the Tuskegee Airmen with their fight. They tried to hold them back. They tried to keep them out of the war efforts, and they succeeded, being successful at bomber escort. And just like us, they didn't think we were going to open, and we opened. And now people are responding to the heroic tale of the Tuskegee Airmen.
And you shocked the world. Last week, a lot of people did not think that Red Tails would do $19+ million, but the world really rallied around it. What helped to make that happen?
The African American community. Without a doubt. It was just extraordinary, the momentum that went out. But also what it did, it helped galvanize white people who had never heard of the story of the Tuskegee Airmen to really stop and say, what is going on? This is the first real good feel movie of the year. I mean, it's the first time there's something really positive. And one of the interesting things is it's the first time that a lot of people have felt good about being in America for a long time. So the film just kind of washed itself over across the great land of America with an incredible response to it.
And it's a great fun movie full of aerial dynamic, incredible dogfights, probably the most incredible dogfights that we've ever seen in film. Who is this film made for?
Well, George Lucas says there's no denying that it's a love letter to African Americans' contribution to the war efforts in World War II. But in addition to that, for young kids, he wants young kids to, like you said, feel like they're in a P-51 Mustang flying over the skies over there. And I think he accomplished that.
And so what has it felt like? Because when you see these gentlemen in here who have just valorously served our country, here you had to reprise what they were back in the 1940s. And you've done this enough. You go into a room with these guys, they are the rock stars.
They really are the rock stars. I mean, the presence that these men exude. It's funny because I went with Dr. Roscoe Brown and did the Veterans Day Parade. And just to see him on the streets of Manhattan, and see the people leaning over the buildings and yelling his name and acknowledging that insignia, that is the Tuskegee Airmen insignia, people recognize that, and there's so much power there. But their accomplishments definitely speak for themselves. And you see these men in their 90s now with still such, strength and pride and honor in their countenance. It makes you proud to not only be an African American, but an American. Because it really is an American story. I remember the first time I heard about the Tuskegee Airmen was in 1995 doing the HBO movie. And I was, 20-something years old. I read it and got emotional reading the script, but also I got pissed off. It was like, here I am, finished my education, and I didn't even know this man existed. The men of education. And I think that's what fueled my career to move on to movies like Men of Honor and Master Chief Carl Bashir and Pearl Harbor and Joy Miller, because I know that kids, a lot of times, the ones that are blessed here to go to college, and get that education, that's wonderful, but the majority, especially inner city kids, they don't get this opportunity. So they go to movies, and they're celebrating Tarzan and all these other people and saying, oh, those are my heroes, but there's not many black faces. But the reality is that there are African American heroes among us.
And you have the distinction of really being the war actor of our generation. Very, very quickly that has happened. That's really remarkable. But playing a Tuskegee Airman, how special has that been for you personally?
Well, it's the first time I had met them on the set. Again, was in 1995, but on this movie, because this encompassed, the first movie dealt with the racism that they had to deal with in Tuskegee, Alabama, and that movie ended with a smaller budget. So they didn't have time to tell the scope of their contribution to the war effort. But when we were in Prague, we were on this Russian air base, and we were sitting there, and they just recreated this whole air base with all these black faces, and to have these men walk up to you and start to tell their stories, I mean, we wept, man. We wept every day, because as an actor, you want to try to find a little iota of truth in what you do, and when you find that, you want to hang on to it and let it fuse everything that your character does. And these men, as you can see, I mean, their presence just evades your soul, and it's been special. And it's so funny because every time we've had 30-something of these screenings, and there's always an airman that come up and introduce themselves, and every day it's a blessing. And to see the ones that we met today, it's a true blessing.
Thank you very much.
I know you've heard more than once or twice. Why did you do this? Because you're a white guy, you've had this tremendously successful career, you didn't have to do this.
How did you get the memo?
He's got more soul than any of us now. But why was this film important for you to make?
Well, George first told me about it in 1990, and to be honest, I had never heard of the Tuskegee Airmen. But it was one of those things that, you know, if you're a producer, you're always looking for a great story to tell, always a great story to make. And this was such a no-brainer. Once he described who the men were, what the adversity that they had to get through, what they eventually were able to accomplish in Europe, and then, of course, the tragedy that fell them once they came back to the United States, to a country that didn't care. That was such an overpowering story, and it took us about 23 years to actually get this off the ground. And part of the problem was that it's such a big story. You have like 3 films. You have the Tuskegee problem, the racism that they went through. Then you have the action-adventure part, when they first go sent over to Africa, but they're not allowed to fly. It was only until really 1943, 44, when we were losing about 50, 60 bombers a day, the British and the Americans, which were about 500, 600 kids a day, that actually they got their first shot. And to see this extraordinary group of people, including the grounds crew and everything, actually fight for a country that really did not want them flying for them. That was just such an amazing story to me, and that was something that we all just jumped on board on. There's a companion documentary, Double Victory, which Cuba, you narrated. Obviously, Rick, you were a little bit involved in Double Victory. But it was actually, I had as much fun doing the documentary, because what we got to do was we knew that this story, the action-adventure part, because films are so expensive, because recreating the dogfights are so expensive, you know, it's hard to get a history lesson over to the American public. So what we wanted to do was make the adventure exciting enough where people, especially young kids, would be able to